For 7 years, I supported my husband's dream by working not just one, but 3 jobs. And the only thing I got in return was a court summons. It felt like a joke. But that day in court, when I presented a document I had personally signed, the room went silent. The prenup I had signed in Paris. In that moment, just as the confident look in his eyes vanished, the guilt I had carried for years disappeared too. But before I explain how I got there, I need to go back to the beginning. When he first met me, my name was Lena Hartman. I was 29 years old, an up-and-coming analyst working at an international finance firm's New York office. I had been accepted into the executive training program and was on my way up. That morning, my boss had told me, "There are very few people your age in this program, Lena. Big things are ahead for you." That evening, everything changed. I met Daniel Weiss at a friend's birthday party. He was a software engineer, working on his own startup project. The more we talked, the more people gathered around him. He was developing a next-gen order and inventory management software. His eyes sparkled, and he was so passionate that I wanted to believe something big was going to happen. By the end of the night, we were alone on the balcony. "I have a great idea, but no one wants to invest. No one trusts someone who comes from nothing," he said honestly. I'll never forget what he said that night. "If we invest together, this could be the company of the future." 3 months later, Daniel's computer broke down. All of his projects were on it. He didn't have the money to buy a new one, so without thinking, I bought one for him. "You're investing in our future," he said, kissing me. 6 months later, he quit his job and focused entirely on the startup. His savings were running low, and investment talks were falling through. I started paying our bills. Then, I paid his rent, his car payment, the internet bill. I ended up covering almost all of the expenses. "It's only temporary," he said one day as we were buying discounted ramen at the grocery store. "Investment is coming soon. Everything will change." A year later, we got engaged. Around the same time, my company offered me a 12-month advanced executive program in London. It was my dream. Going would be a career game changer. Daniel said, "If you want to go, I'll understand." But his disappointment was clear in his eyes. I didn't go. I chose to stay and build our future together. 2 weeks later, my company restructured my position. Supposedly a coincidence. They actually just wanted to part ways quietly. "See it as an opportunity," he told me. "Now you can help me full-time." And that's how the downfall started. I found a job as an assistant for half my old salary. I started waitressing at a restaurant in the evenings. When that wasn't enough, I drove for a car rental app late into the night. Some nights, former colleagues would get into my car, and when they saw me, they'd smile awkwardly. "You were supposed to be a manager. What happened?" they'd ask. I'd say, "I'm supporting Daniel's startup. I'm investing in our future." They'd nod like they understood, but I could see the pity in their eyes. Daniel, on the other hand, was coding until dawn. Maybe once a week he'd go out, eat something, then head back to his computer. When he got home, he would excitedly talk about algorithms and how the investor meetings went. Meanwhile, I was soaking my feet in cold water, calculating how I'd make the rent that month. We only had my mother Brigitte at our wedding. My family, they never understood why I gave up my career for this man. "That boy is dragging you down," my father had said in our last conversation. My sister asked directly, "Why are you tying your life to a man's dream?" Brigitte never liked me. "Daniel needs to marry someone who's as smart as he is," she'd say. She'd wrinkle her nose at my business clothes. "My son is going to be a visionary businessman. He needs someone on his level." And the honeymoon. We were invited to Paris. Daniel had struck a deal with a French investor, and the travel expenses were covered by them. Paris was beautiful, but it was tense for us. While Daniel rushed off to meetings, I wandered the streets alone. On the third night, he drank too much and passed out in the hotel room. That moment, I had an idea. I had supported his dream, but now I needed some security for myself. Early the next morning, I met with a lawyer recommended by an American woman I'd met in Paris, Monsieur Bellamy. That day, we prepared a prenup. It was designed to protect my investment, my years of work, and my sweat equity. I was granted 49%. If Daniel's startup succeeded, my share would be guaranteed. That evening, while Daniel was still groggy, I placed the papers in front of him. "The investor wants these documents," I said. Without even blinking, he signed them. "For our future," he said, raising a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings." Unfortunately, I had no idea at that moment how that beginning would turn into the end for me. After returning from Paris, life seemed to hold some promise for a while. Daniel's company, Inventec, started to take shape. He had named it Inventec. He said it was going to revolutionize inventory management. He did the first beta tests with a few small businesses, launched the website, and shot promotional videos. There was a real sense of progress, even if it was small. I tried to be there for every step. I was still working 3 jobs, but I'd make him coffee at night, help him prepare demo presentations, and audit his budget. When I think back to those days, my heart still aches because, in those moments, there was still a we. Or at least I thought there was. By the end of the 3rd year, we finally landed our first client. It was a small but passionate company, and they said the software worked. This was the turning point for Inventec. Suddenly, investors started showing interest. Daniel began spending more time outside, going to investor presentations and networking events. He started coming home later. At first, I celebrated. Finally, our hard work was paying off. But then I realized we no longer shared the same dream. I was still working 3 jobs, paying bills, and watching his life unfold from the sidelines. He had created his own stage, leaving me in the background. One night, he came home wearing a brand new suit. His hair was professionally cut, and he had a luxury watch on his wrist. "Prestige is important when you're meeting investors," he said with a shrug. But I was still going to work in secondhand clothes. In those weeks, something inside me started to change. I wasn't just tired anymore. I felt invisible. I felt like an extra in his success story, the shadow in the background, whose name was never mentioned. By the time we reached the 5th year, things became even more obvious. Daniel moved the company to West End Tech Park, and now he had a team: software developers, sales experts, designers, and there was also an assistant, Annika Meyer. She was 27, had studied in Zurich, and was continuing her career in Berlin. She was elegant and impeccably dressed at all times. One evening, when Daniel said, "Annika is one of the best in the industry, incredibly organized," I felt a crack form in my heart. I first met them at the company's opening party. Annika greeted me politely but coldly. "Lena, right? Daniel's wife. How nice," she said. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe. I was there in my 3-year-old, repeatedly washed dress, holding a tray of snacks from the grocery store. Daniel, on the other hand, was raising a glass of champagne with investors, his eyes shining as he talked about the company's vision. "Lena is practical, she doesn't like complexity," he said, coming over and taking the tray from my hands. "Annika, can you show Lena to the kitchen?" In that moment, a knot formed in my stomach. I wasn't just the wife of the house, I felt like a servant. In Daniel's real world, I had become just a detail. Of course, Brigitte was there too. She was wearing one of her expensive suits, proudly standing next to her son. "My son, this is just the beginning," she said with tears in her eyes. She only nodded at me. "Lena, have you refreshed the cheese platters?" That night, something else cracked in my heart. I wasn't just feeling excluded anymore. I felt belittled, and it wasn't just from their looks. It was also fueled by Daniel's silence and lack of direction. As the days went by, the distance grew. We no longer ate dinner together. Daniel said he was working late at the office and sometimes didn't even come home. I was still struggling to make ends meet with 3 jobs, and whenever I tried to offer help with the company's accounting, he'd push me aside saying, "These things are getting more complicated. I don't want to burden you." One night, I fell asleep on the couch from exhaustion. His phone was on the table and a notification popped up. My eyes involuntarily drifted to it. "Annika, I'm working late today. Ordered Mizone for you, at the back table. Your blue suit looked great on you." My heart froze. I scrolled up the screen. Messages that had been going on for weeks. Emoji-filled smiles. Late night, good night notes. Each one felt like a dagger. The next morning, I confronted Daniel. "Are you with Annika?" I asked. He looked away. "That's none of your business," he said. In that moment, I understood. It was really over. But then something worse happened that day. The envelope I received contained divorce papers. The reason? Incompatibility. The proposed alimony? Laughably low. It was less than a quarter of his new salary. At that moment, something snapped inside me. Brigitte called. "Daniel's too busy now. These things are handled by the lawyers. And you're lucky. He's still being generous with you. That night, I opened one of my old textbooks. Inside was that famous Paris prenup. It was still in its envelope. I hadn't opened it in 7 years. But now, it was time. And for the first time in years, a new feeling rose inside me. Determination. The moment the prenup from Paris came out of the envelope, I felt the weight in my hands. An invisible burden I had carried for 7 years suddenly turned into a physical document. As I looked at the envelope, the first thought that crossed my mind wasn't revenge. It was simply respect. For myself. For my dreams. For the quiet effort I had put in. That night, I decided to give Daniel one last chance. I didn't need lawyers. I wanted to speak to him face to face. Part of me still believed a peaceful solution was possible. The next evening, just after 6, I went to the Inventec office. In the lobby of the luxury building, a receptionist I didn't recognize told me, "We don't accept anyone without an appointment," in a polite but distant tone. "I'm Lena Weiss, Daniel's wife." The woman paused for a moment. She seemed to recognize my name, but not my face. She called someone, then said, "Please, come in." My heart was racing as the elevator doors opened. The weight of 7 years of effort, love, and loyalty was on my shoulders. The office. It felt like a completely different world. The city lights were visible through glass walls. Minimalist furniture, expensive artwork, and an eerie silence. Daniel was sitting behind a large desk. Gone was the guy in sweatpants. He was wearing a designer jacket, his hair neatly styled, and his face wore a professional expression that felt unfamiliar to me. "Lena," he said. He didn't stand up. I thought we'd be talking through lawyers. "I don't think so," I replied. I refused to sit down and stayed standing. "We built everything together. 7 years, 3 jobs, thousands of hours. I at least deserve an explanation." Daniel sighed. "Please, don't start with that sacrifice story again." For a moment, I was stunned. "Sacrifice story?" I asked, my voice low but firm. "Daniel, while you were developing software, I financed that computer. While you were coding, I paid for your food, your rent. I'm still working 3 jobs." He avoided my gaze. "Look, we want different lives now. There's no point in dragging this out. The alimony we're offering is quite generous." I smiled. A bitter smile. "It's not even half of what you've saved in 6 months. You gave me 7 years of my life, and now you're offering me a 6-month hush money." "What do you want?" he asked, his expression tense. "Half of the company?" That's when I made my decision. "I just want justice. And recognition." He couldn't respond. When the door opened, Brigitte entered. With her familiar, haughty stance and designer bag, she looked less like the mother of a CEO and more like a business partner. "Daniel, I told you not to speak alone," she said, glancing at me. "These things should be handled by professionals." "When did you become a professional, Brigitte?" I said calmly. "The woman who hasn't stepped into our home in 7 years is now telling me how I should talk." Just as I was about to leave, I stopped. "Daniel, there's just one thing I want to know," I said. "In the beginning, did you really love me? Or was I just an investor you could easily access?" Daniel's eyes locked onto mine, then slowly shifted to the floor. "Don't complicate this," he said. That moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just my heart that broke. It was the dream I had believed in for years. The next morning, instead of going to work, I headed to the university library. I sat at the shelf where young Lena had kept the notebooks filled with her dreams. A voice inside me whispered, "It's your turn now." That day, I dialed a number given to me by an old client. "Chloe Brandt, family law expert. How can I help you?" "I'm Lena Weiss," I said. "I want to claim the compensation for the work I've done over the last 7 years. And I have a prenup signed in Paris." There was a brief pause on the other end, then her voice became clear. "I'd love to hear the details. This story feels like it's just beginning." And she was right. The real fight was just beginning. When the first day of the trial arrived, it felt like I was carrying the weight of 7 years on my shoulders. The only decent outfit I had was a dark gray suit I bought years ago for job interviews. It was a bit loose now. The years of working 3 jobs had worn down not just my body but my spirit too. But it didn't matter. Today, the voice of the invisible woman would be heard. Chloe greeted me at the courthouse stairs. Dressed in a deep blue suit with a sharp gaze, she looked every bit the professional. "Stay calm. Just answer the questions. I'll handle the objections," she said. When her hand touched my shoulder, I felt a slight tremor, but it wasn't fear. It was determination. We were the first ones to enter the courtroom. It was a conscious choice. Chloe's strategy was to make the judge's first impression be in our favor. We sat down, and minutes passed in silence. Then, the doors opened. Daniel walked in. He was wearing a custom-made suit with the face of a successful businessman. Behind him, a 4-person army of lawyers, all carrying the same navy blue folders, walked with the same seriousness. Annika was there too, in a dark blue dress, simple heels, and a blank expression. Then came Brigitte, with her pearls, cream-colored suit, and her usual distant arrogance. It was like a stage play, and I was the real woman in the middle of the stage. Judge Dr. Margarete Heller, a woman in her 60s, with her hair tightly pulled back, started. "No unnecessary theatrics," she said. "Case: Weiss versus Weiss. Divorce, asset division, and property rights assessment." Daniel's lawyer, a famous name, Stefan Keller, began. "Your Honor, this is a simple divorce case," he started. "My client, Daniel Weiss, is the founder and CEO of Weiss Tech Solutions. A generous settlement offer has been made post-marriage dissolution. Unfortunately, Lena Weiss has escalated the legal process by rejecting the offer." Chloe jumped in immediately. "Your Honor, my client has contributed to the foundation of this company through 7 years of invisible effort. This offer is not a fair compensation. The evidence we have clearly shows Lena Weiss's financial and operational contributions during the founding and development of Weiss Tech." Keller's gaze was cold as ice. "Let's first clarify your client's contributions." Daniel took the witness stand. Keller introduced him with a proud recount of his success story, talking about his passion for coding, his startup journey, the investments, and the 30-person team. His words echoed like a business success fairy tale in the room, but when it came to me, his tone changed. "Mr. Weiss, what was your wife's work life like?" Keller asked. Daniel cleared his throat. "She did various jobs: waitressing, assisting, occasionally driving passengers." "Did she hold an official position at your company?" "At first, she handled some accounting tasks, but as we grew, we handed those duties over to the professional team." Every word felt like a slap across my face. I had given my life to this man's dream. Now it was being reduced to occasional accounting. When it was my turn, my knees were shaking as I walked up to the stand, but my voice was clear. Chloe looked me in the eye and nodded. "I'm currently working 3 jobs. During the day, I'm an assistant at West End Hospital. I work at restaurants in the evenings. On weekends, I drive for a car rental app." Keller grinned and asked, "What is your annual income?" "About 42,000 euros last year." "So it's not even 1/10 of your husband's current annual earnings," he said. "Could financial differences have been a factor in your relationship?" Chloe quickly objected. "Speculative and leading." The judge agreed. "Accepted." But the words hung in the air. They had already been planted in the minds. Successful man. Self-sacrificing but unsuccessful woman. Keller questioned my career choices. "Why did you reject the executive program in London? Why didn't you stay in finance?" I answered, "Because my husband asked for my support." He said, "Let's invest together." I took this journey with him. By the time we reached the lunch break, my hands were cold. I splashed cold water on my face in the restroom. Chloe appeared beside me. I paid attention to the judge. "She's really listening to you. There's curiosity in her eyes. She trusts you." But that afternoon, the stage was Brigitte's. She strutted into the courtroom like she was stepping onto a runway. Keller's questions seemed pre-rehearsed. "My son is very generous. Lena's lifestyle was sustained by him. He never pressured her. But Lena never truly contributed to the company's vision. For a moment, I thought, this is too much. Brigitte was talking as if I didn't exist. She was portraying me as a half-support in her son's shadow. Yet I had financed every step. I had paid for every conference. But she either didn't know that, or chose to pretend she didn't. At that moment, I turned to Chloe and whispered, I don't want to wait anymore. Let's present the prenup now. Chloe slowly nodded. Are you ready to change this story forever? She asked. It's already changed, I said. And the prenup, for the first time in 7 years, was brought into the light. The atmosphere in the courtroom was almost frozen. Chloe gracefully pulled the prenup from her bag, wrapped in a manila envelope. Your Honor, she said, her voice calm but clear. My client, Lena Weiss, wishes to present this prenuptial agreement, signed in Paris at the beginning of the marriage, to the court. As she extended the envelope, the room fell completely silent for a moment. Judge Dr. Heller raised an eyebrow, took the file, and glanced at the first page. Mr. Keller, was your client aware of this document? For the first time, Stephen Keller's face softened. He looked at Daniel. Daniel's expression. Joe was indescribable. A mix of shock and panic. We are seeing this document for the first time, Your Honor, Keller said. We are questioning its validity. Chloe smiled, elegant but sharp. The contract was signed in Paris before a notary. On page 4, there is Daniel Weiss's signature, along with witnesses and the notary's seal. We can have it analyzed by any expert who desires. The judge turned the pages. It states that 49% of the company belongs to Lena Weiss and is defined as a sweat equity partnership due to her financial contributions during the marriage. It also clearly states that this share cannot be mixed with other marital assets in the event of divorce. In the front rows of the courtroom, Brigitte's hand went to her pearls. Annika didn't even raise her head, staring straight ahead. Daniel was pressing his hands onto his knees, trying hard to stay calm, but his eyes were vacant. His beloved control was no longer in his hands. Mr. Weiss, said the judge, looking directly at Daniel. Is this document yours? Daniel swallowed. I may have signed such a document in Paris, but I was drunk at the time. I don't clearly remember what I signed. Records show that you had your first investment meeting in Paris that day. You were sober enough then, weren't you? Asked Judge Heller. Her tone wasn't questioning, but judgmental. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Your Honor, I said. I gave him this document before he went to the investor meeting that morning. He quickly read through it, said for our future, and signed it. That document has been in my possession ever since, but I wanted to trust him. It was never brought up again until the divorce papers came. Chloe quickly took over. My client, Lena Weiss, has contributed money, time, and effort to Daniel Weiss's dream for 7 years. All early expenses of the company, prototypes, presentations, office rents, were paid from her personal income. She also provided accounting and customer services to small businesses. All of these contributions are documented. And with this document, they are now legal. The judge nodded and took off her glasses. This document recognizes Lena Weiss as a 49% partner in the company. Furthermore, this share will be treated as separate property, not subject to the division of assets in the divorce. A murmur rose in the middle of the room. Daniel's face had turned completely white. Brigitte pressed her lips together. Annika still hadn't moved. Chloe continued. The current value of the company has been independently assessed at approximately 16 million euros. My client's share is worth about 7.8 million euros. The 120,000 euro offer from the other side doesn't even come close to fairness, let alone honesty. Daniel could no longer defend himself. Keller leaned in, whispering in his ear. Brigitte avoided my gaze. Annika was the first to look at me, but there was no regret or shame in her eyes, just a blank, empty expression. The judge brought the gavel down, silencing the room. The court confirms Lena Weiss's 49% partnership in Weiss Tech Solutions. This share will be treated separately and will not be included in the divorce settlement. Furthermore, spousal support has been deemed unnecessary. The parties will either continue to jointly manage the company or Lena Weiss's shares will be bought at current market value. In the front row, Brigitte's pearls trembled slightly. Daniel looked as though he had aged. Behind the arrogant mask he had built up until now, only a tired and defeated man remained. As for me, for the first time, I stood tall. I was no longer invisible. The judge turned to Chloe. The parties are given 30 days to reach an agreement. Otherwise, the case will be reevaluated. As we left the courtroom, reporters were waiting at the door. Chloe professionally deflected their questions while I stood off to the side. Outside, the weight that had been pressing down on me for 7 years felt like it had finally been lifted. I had losses, yes. My dreams had changed. But now, there was one truth: my voice. And that day, in that courtroom, I had broken my silence forever. When I walked out of the courtroom, there was a void inside me. A strange silence. It wasn't the victorious euphoria that comes with winning. It was more the tired silence left after a long battle. I had papers in my hands, numbers, ratios, percentages, but the real thing that had been reborn within me wasn't a document, it was me. The Lena I had lost, buried in silence under Daniel's shadow for years, was breathing again. That week, I received the official news from the company. Weiss Tech Solutions offered a structured payment plan to buy out my shares over 5 years. Chloe said it was a smart decision for both stability and my future. I agreed, not with ambition, but with clarity. Not with bitterness, but with consciousness. Because now, the only thing I would use that money for wasn't to fix the past, it was to build the future. 3 months later, I moved into my own office in a newly developing part of the city. I even wrote the name myself, Hartman Financial Advisory. Under it, the line read, "Security, Vision, and Visibility for Women." Because I didn't want other women to remain invisible like I had. If they were partners, their names should be mentioned. If they were investors, their shares should be protected. My first client was a small cafe owner. She had carried all the workload in the business she co-owned with her husband, but her name was nowhere on the paperwork. When she spoke, I recognized the fire of injustice in her eyes. I didn't just offer her advice. I gave her the real identity she would see when she looked in the mirror. And that day, I made myself a promise. I would never be silent again. One evening, my secretary knocked on my door. "You've got flowers," she said, smiling. She left a delicate bouquet of white lilies on my desk. Along with it, a small envelope. When I read the note inside, my heart both ached and lightened. "Congratulations on your feature in Forbes. You truly deserve it. C." It was Daniel's note. Yes, Forbes. That month, they had included me on their Entrepreneurs to Watch list. The article mentioned both my name and Daniel's. His technical brilliance, my financial vision, and most importantly, it made the silent, invisible efforts we had carried visible. It was an honest, objective, and respectful article. But I didn't respond to the note. Because there are some bridges that, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. They become monuments, the silent witnesses of lessons learned and growth. As I looked out at the city from my office window, for the first time in my life, I was truly alone, but in my solitude, I was free. My phone rang. It was a message from the girls' group. "Dinner at 8, don't be late. Party popper." I went downstairs, got in my car. The wind coming through the window didn't smell of Paris, but the voice of Berlin. It was harsh, but it was honest. When I arrived at dinner, my friends raised their glasses. "To Lena," they said. "To the one who doesn't stay silent, who creates her own justice." I laughed. I truly laughed. For the first time in a long time, with my heart. With that pure laugh that came from within. Because I was no longer someone's wife, not someone's investor either. I was just me, Lena Hartman. And this time, I was truly the hero of my own story. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. With each new story, we grow stronger together. We start anew together. Share your thoughts with us, because every voice can light the way for someone else's journey.